Once you have felt God's presence in life, it stays with you. Sometimes you lose it and lose sight of it, but it stays with you and it comes back. And this experience is wide known among people who have journeyed on a travel to understand deeper about their life and spiritual um emotions. And you see it among Christians as well as Jewish and Muslim and Hinduistic people, and also shamanic, um, Zoroastrians, and African minor religions. You even see it in nature religions, that this understanding of a greater power and some kind of grace or curse that can happen in your life, and that there is this beginning of everything, that everything is dependent on something until you reach the very beginning, and at the same time that you can be in situations in life where you feel alone and abandoned, and if you have the courage to open your heart and try to ask for guidance, a light can strike you. If you are out at seas or maybe in dire straits situations and you feel you are calling out for help, maybe you don't know why or from where you're calling out to life, and you find an answer. You're going to a temple and things get solved. You kneel in the church and then your prayers are heard. You go and bow down and put your face to the ground in the mosque, and you find that God has listened to your prayers. If you have experienced that you know, then you know what I'm talking about. Of course, if you reject or haven't been through such an experience, it can be hard to relate to. So what am I talking about? I'm actually just talking about God's presence in our life, and what we call God is the power behind everything that can reach into everything, and can give us the grace or the curse, can open our hearts or let it be closed, show us the way or lead us astray. And I believe in such power, and that it has its ways in life among us people. I've seen people gone from very, very anti-religious and anti-godly ways to accept and open their hearts to some kind of practices. Some become spiritual, others become very, very conservatively religious and succumb to the idea of a greater power in their life. Their soul need that connection, and they find it. And without it, they felt lost. And when they found it, they start talking about it. Everyone within the context of his own religion or culture. I've heard it from Muslims as well as from Christians. I have seen on videos from Hinduistic people who were astray and then was led by the guru or by some inspirational meditation that opened their heart and minds to find this source, the Brahman they want to connect to, and the light that's in between, and the way to that source. We find it in the mystical ways as well, that people feel ecstasy and feel in a trance, or understand that their spirit can elevate and like almost get out of the body or be free of it for seconds, and just understand that life is also more than the material we are seeing and the body we are in, and it can be totally different, and that the soul has its ways that the mind and the body doesn't always understand, but can feel and can sometimes just follow along. And that's the mystery and the thing that we dwell on. And it has been a recurring thing that has been pushed away for centuries also by by science in modern times, saying that this is superstition. But even though they see it's superstition, no problem. It's not opposing to science. It's just another dimension. And with time, even those very hardcore ideas have been open for digging into these mysteries. So having your spiritual experience is something that is shared between many people. That's what I found with dialogues and talks and following biographies and listening to documentaries, and YouTube has been a great source for that. And so the presence of God in my life has always been there and been following me, of course, since childhood, but I became aware of it as a teenager, and I didn't have any relation with God or felt that God is there. As a child and a teenager, I had periods where I felt the world around me much more present than any other idea. The girl standing on the balcony on opposite side of my grandma's house, where I usually like to be, she felt my heart and mind much more of life than anything beyond that. The small cars I played with, or my other needs, came in the first place, and that's how we are as human. It's not something that's just there in our conscience all the time, the presence of God. But as you go along in life, you start feeling it, even though I put it away. I have on my journey really gone there where I said I would put everything away that was from my culture and background. I didn't want to call on God, and I didn't want to pray to God, and I didn't want to have anything to do with mentioning this God in my life. I wanted to go about my life as a material reality like everybody else. But somewhere in my depth, it was there, looming and rooming, and it was there like trying to find a way out, and it made my psyche sick for some time, and it also took my powers, and I felt things also tended to go wrong, but maybe they could have gone well, and I would have lost sight of this spiritual entity inside me, and maybe been going to therapy or using all my money on drugs or forgetting what I'm missing. But somehow I was fortunate that after all this time and this travel I've been through, I found that this that wanted to get out, my spiritual experience and the presence of this source of life, the only and one source of life I believe in its presence, but ununderstandable presence. I cannot describe and I cannot set words on. We only can understand God like we understand metaphors of other things. So if God tells us He's the light for heavens and earth, and He's the light for life, we can only relate to that from the light we know about, the light of the sun or the light of some electricity, and how that affects the surroundings and our eyes, but we don't know the reality of it. So I see God without seeing and knowing, without really understanding. I just know it's a force with a great power and love and connectivity, and that we can open up to it. And whether we think God is present all the time, or personal, or part of everything all the time, or not, or we think God has abandoned earth, or he's not existing at all, that doesn't change the reality that we have something in us that needs fulfillment. That's what we call the spiritual experience. And that's connected to my experience of the source of life, that I and everybody else has chosen the same word for, calling on, saying you are the one and the source of it, and we need your help, your presence somehow. I need that connectivity and understanding. And so it came bubbling through my conscience. And at one dire straight moment, I was almost drowning at sea. I found myself from my inner thoughts and inner feelings just calling out without saying words. We were at sea in Greenland, and the boat was taking big waves, and it was a Targa boat. We were like 7 persons in it, and it kept rolling up and down all the time, and 3 meters up. I've never experienced such like it in my life. We were just caught by a storm, even though the captain were trying to avoid it with all haste and all power. I remember how he called us out from that village to the boat. I was working in the municipality at that time, and we had a project with these minor schools to develop the internet and develop the school iPad use for kids and as a tool for learning. And we were on our way back, and he said, hurry, I need to get out very quickly. And we got onto that boat, and we got on the road, the sea, and I could see the storm brewing from the left, and he turned right because he needed to go to Julianehop, that Kakotok, and he didn't. The storm caught us, and I remember we passed a small open boat with 2 or 3 persons in it, taking shelter behind a big what can you say, rock on the way, small island, rocky island, and that's everything they had. And he stopped and asked them, are you all okay? They said, we are okay. And he gave notion on the radio that there was a boat there, but he couldn't take them in because he was afraid the boat will get too heavy. And so we got drawn by these big waves, and up and down 3 meters, and we almost cantered on the side, and I felt we almost drowned. Anyhow, that caught me. I didn't feel scared like that in that way. I was anxious and I was surprised, but I wasn't neither like, I was hysteric or sweaty or something. I kept calm like the others in the boat and held on to the rails and looked at the captain and saw the seriousness on his face. And I could see that these dark waves could just swallow us. This was maybe my last moment. And I had for years not been calling on God or calling on help from that God, because I was so disappointed with what happened to me after the Khartoum controversy and how I was abandoned. I felt also like kind of abandoned by God himself, because I lost big. It was a big tragedy in my life and brought me all the way to Greenland, and I was very sad about it, and I didn't want it. And so I tried changing my life, and there in 2016, like 8 years after, I started I didn't leave God all at once. He stayed with me in my heart deeply, also after my change from the views I had at that point. But I said to God, I'm going to explore life without it, and without you, and without calling on you, and without trying to understand how it is to live, without having your presence in life all the time. And maybe you are fake, maybe it's not true, it's just an illusion that I'm calling on a God that doesn't exist. That was my situation, and I had that situation for 7 or 8 years, where I was close to letting go, but I couldn't. There was so much that reminded me of God's presence. Sometimes religious people came by, whether they were Christians or some other kind. Sometimes I saw things on the net that reminded me that people are on a journey on seeking this spiritual depth. I wasn't alone at any point. There were many people, seekers as well, also not understanding but relating to the mystery and opening their hearts for that kind of revelation and understanding. And so happened that day that I just found myself on the sea, almost drowning, calling out from my inner self, God, God, you can save us from this. And I was reminded of the verses later in the Quran. I reminded myself that God says that when the darkness of the earth and the seas takes people with storm or surrounds them, they call out to the one true God, and then when they leave and they get to the shore, they turn away, and they turn back to their old ways. And so when I went to the shore, I called my friend, who was a musician. I told him, "Where are you? I just landed, and I'm in need of a drink." And we went to that local bar and sat there. I told him about my experience, but a seed was brewing back into my heart that God helped me. And one could say, no, it was the Targa boat, and it was just your illusion of drowning that put you there. You didn't need to call out, and I wasn't calling out. I was just trying to hold on to the rails, but I found myself from the psyche just turning upwards. And so I did exactly as people would do, not taking it too seriously, and not thinking that it was truly God that intervened there, because I couldn't see a hand doing that. But I was saved from drowning, and the others as well. And I've never seen that very, very capable captain so anxious in his life. He said it was one of my worst trips I've ever had, and it was very, very hard. And so happened also years later that driving through the Scandinavian forests up in the north for 1,000 miles, seeking job, I had the same feeling, being all alone with a car that could break down any moment among these trees, and no connection, no connectivity for the net, and no house in sight. And it didn't happen, but I kept praying. I could see how fragile we are as people. And one night I remember I had a quarrel with God. Like I faced my head to the skies and said, "Why are you doing this to me? And why are you punishing me? And why are you cursing me like this?" Just being in Greenland, and with the type of people around me, and with my brains and understanding and spiritual ways, I couldn't find the people to understand it. So I was angry. But suddenly I saw that I turned upwards and was talking to God, or maybe just like having this intimate moment of anger. And I'm sure the true source of life, and God will understand what kind of frustrations we humans have. But well, that kept on going, on and off. And I tried to keep it out of my life, saying I will just live an ordinary secular life like everybody else. And at the same time, I could see these Christian friends I had. They were deeply founded in their spiritual ways, and I could see some of my Muslim friends and colleagues, whom some of them kept relating to me. Very few, unfortunately, many people, they turn from you and don't want to talk to you, and I can't see that as a part of God's ways, that people just leave you and become judges instead of staying human and relating to your situation or troubles. And that happened all the way around, and that's what makes people sometimes hate the idea of religion and God, because they can see all kind of practices in God's name and God's law and whatever that actually are very harsh, very evil, and can be very, very suppressing. And that's what I hated and still do about the religious practices and people. But slowly my soul was in a way trying to filter these two things apart, especially in dialogues with very close friends, and by thinking, reading, without being conscious of it, because that wasn't my goal. My goal was just to live an ordinary secular life, having a family and taking care of my kids, and finding a job or not, and watching movies and exploring life, and all these things people do without giving notion to that spiritual need. But it kept bubbling up, and it kept getting stronger. At one point I was in my opinion in a dire straits where nobody really reached out for me, and I needed the work, and I needed to find a way out of where I was, and then I was there standing it was in May, I never forget it, or was it April, late April, May. I was just standing in the kitchen and looked out, and looked up and closed my eyes, and I said, you, the one God somewhere, you help me. Whoever you are, whatever you are, people are turning away from me and just neglecting me, and some of them even making fun of my failures, and even friends of them. They can see me as a person who has failed totally, and nobody wants. Said, you can get me out of that. And in a course of just a few weeks, I had a job, a very good one, that lasted several years and gave me prosperity economically, and gave my kids also a development that was very needed and very good. So who had I to thank for that? And these people who hired me, yeah, they hired me, but they could have not. They had other options, and maybe close enough. They weren't going to hire me, but it was like they kept me waiting for a while, and then they just said, you are the one chosen. They liked you most. And why didn't anyone else like me most? I was the same, sending the same CV and the same cover letters, but nobody took me in. These people did. And just at that moment where I called, it was very strange. But still, I turned a bit away later, and I kept saying to myself, even though my idea of God's presence was getting much stronger now, and I was in a way trying to get back to these bubbles of connectivity with the presence of God in my life, but I kept turning away as well, and kept wanting to just go on living that life with the roof upon my head of not thinking of the presence of God, the metaphysics as they call it, the things above what we can see and hear and know of. But we can know of this just through other channels. We cannot see or hear or touch, but we can feel it in different ways. I didn't really give up, and I didn't really give my mind up to that. So I got a hit. I really got hit by losing my job because of a situation. I had the most beautiful year of my life that year, with a beautiful, nice colleague, and nice people around me, and good students. I was in that seminary teaching pedagogy to students who were going to teach kids, and that was beautiful, and what was the lift I needed, because I have so much experience and competence, competence, and a lot of education that's not being used, and so it happened that I turned back and didn't really want to think deeply about it. But then it struck me that I lost it. The second year came a person who was, in my opinion, totally psychopathic, narcissistic. It was very, very, very obvious, and I could see it from the first 2-3 weeks and months he was there. The way he treated people around him. He didn't have direct problems with me in the beginning, but I could see it, and I kept like getting myself out of harm's way. But I could see how he manipulated and made things done. It was very scary, like a demon was in that guy. But I could see all the traits they talk about in the narcissistic and psychopathic list that people can show, and I'm usually very empathic to humans, and I look at them with a clear slate, and I take care not to judge them, even though I can have a judgmental mentality because I'm a critic. But I could see the traits slowly showing from the others, and I could see the danger. And then after some months, it started reaching me, and I could see how those who ran the place started shifting their attention and the way of thinking of us and what we are doing, and started getting into some awkward situations. That's exactly what these people do and are good at, and I don't know how they fell for it, but I could feel the danger coming, and in the end I had to find a way out. But by God's grace, I took hold of the spiritual side of me and said, God, help me through this and help me out of it in a good way so we don't crash. It was very, very close to crashing, and I had my kids to look out for. And he helped me, and it was like kind of a reminder to say, No, it was I who brought you there. Listen to your inner voice. I brought you there, opened the door for you. It wasn't a coincidence. And now, when you almost turned away and thought, nah, it was me, my cleverness, or whatever we people can say to ourselves, then he shook my head again and sent this guy to disturb things. And I lost my job because they misunderstood the situations. And I tried warning that leader. I told her, you are like a chicken and I'm like the dog. I'm trying to bark to tell you there is a fox at your fence, but you're not listening. You're just annoyed of the barking of the dog. Remember that. And I went and I never saw her again. And I hope one day she will understand what I'm saying, because she seemed such a nice lady and was very friendly in the beginning, and then she turned, and I could see that was the effect of that guy's presence. And I know many people have dealt with psychopaths and narcissists, and they know these traits and they can see them. There's only one way for empaths who hasn't got the power to face it, and I didn't. That was to get away from it, because we get very, very affected by environments like this. I think I'm one of those people called highly sensitive empaths, that we can feel people and understand them in depth, and at the same time any changes around us, we are very sensitive to that. We can feel it as well, and that affects us very deeply. And I was affected, and it drained my energy, and I had to find ways out, and I was guided. I'm not going to talk in details about it, but I was guided to get out, fortunately with prosperity and a good way, as best as I could at that time anyhow. And so continued my journey, and now finally I've succumbed totally after 2, 3, 4 times of trying and retrying and hits and getting back. It's the source inside me, the source of spiritual light and growth, that wants this contact with the upper sphere and the godly way of life. I know many people has trouble relating to these things because you have to experience them, and some people say you have to be chosen and loved by God to get these hits, otherwise he will leave you alone, because if he really loves you and likes you, he will always show you where you can find him and that he's there. And I know some people will tell me that is Jesus Christ in your life, and others will tell me that's your inspiration from the Sadhguru of India, and others will tell me that's your Muslim God speaking deeply from inside you. But listen, the true one God of life, and Abraham, and before that has been there all the time, before Christ and before the Islamic religion and before the Hinduistic, and any of these, they are just practices. Where were all that before that? He's been there from the beginning, had just other names and forms, and maybe people talked about that God in a different manner, but it keeps getting to the same issue, that there is a force we can connect to that's deeper and higher and really gives us spiritual growth. I have this big question in my life. How come, if only one religion is true, that God shows himself through different religions? And how come people can find the light of God even though they don't believe, if it's Christian faith, they don't really believe in Jesus as a God, or turn to him to talk to, or turn to the Hinduistic to talk to, or turn to Muhammad's God to talk to. So I believe that that God of Abraham, the God before, has been there all the time. He's always trying to connect. He's left something in us to connect. Maybe he don't need to use a lot of force on us. Maybe we are just like the Star Wars ships. I don't know if any of you have seen those very old episodes from the 60s, where this Star Wars ship is floating in the space, and our heroes from the Starship 1711, they are exploring the universe as we know it, with captains, Spock and the crew, and they stop by this ship that's floating in the universe, and they find out that they were sent to safety, and that there is a voice inside it that keeps telling them, don't get out of here, and everybody who tries to open a door get electrified. and so they felt that this religious source, whatever it is, it's just keeping them there for a reason, and they break through, and they can see it's just a voice that's been planted there to take them on that journey so they could reach Earth, because that was the closest, safest planet to their way of life and their origins. But if they open the spaceship or they do anything on the way, they will be lost in space and they will die. So this spaceship has a destination, they have to stay inside it. I sometimes see this picture in life, that if you are wanted by this one great force, he will find a way to always show you that he's there, maybe not directly, but by leaving these elements that will always remind you. Because we are on such a stage that I don't think we are qualified to deeply understand what this godly idea is, and how the universe works, and how big and huge it is, and what kind of force is behind it. It's like explaining to an ant or a bee or a small insect or anything like that, explaining to them what we are thinking now, telling them about God like I'm speaking, what would they could relate to. They have another language, another way of feeling and understanding that's limited to their way of life. And the same with us. Everything we say and do cannot reach those spheres and levels, and that's why maybe the inner contact, the non-direct contact with us through spirituality has been the way that we are shown the way to understand and relate. And maybe we are not lost, as many people just want to say this is the one and last chance. Maybe it's a journey of spiritual growth, also into new dimensions and universe, where we will be there to grow in even more, to be ready to a more huge, bigger understanding. And maybe we have been on a lower stage, not understanding anything. We know it from just this life, whether you believe in this kind of ideas of reincarnation or multidimensional rebirth, or you don't, and you just believe it's this one time. We have been on stages in life that we didn't understand anything. I was a kid, didn't know anything. Just a year ago, I wasn't able to say these things I'm saying now, and now I'm saying them, and I don't know if they are totally truth, but that's what I feel. That's what I'm led to understand. That's what I'm chosen for in many ways, and many people don't even need it in their life. And that's a strange thing, because what happens to these people, and how are they living without the necessarily depth that I need to get the fuel to get on, to be living more intensely. And that's what someone told me. You are chosen to live more intensely. So every moment in your life is felt more intensely than many others, where moments just pass by. And sometimes I can really feel it when I sit with people or hear them talk or meet them, that they don't see the same intensity. And other times I meet people with the same intensity, and even maybe deeper intensity than I have, where they can just sit and meditate or look into nature or walk, and they come back with a great intensity in their minds. How did that happen? And I have been at times not able to catch this intensity that I am sitting in just right now. This is a beautiful moment for me, because I never knew I'm going to express these things, but things are just floating out of me right now. And this intensity, will it last? I know I've lost it before, and I have had times and years where maybe time just flew by, more shallowly, more less intense and more less understandable. But now I'm catching up, or maybe I'm just living these moments now, and they will disappear a little later, where I'm gonna make some food and be occupied by daily things. So the intensity can also shift in one lifetime for the same person, and it can definitely be different between one person and another. And the need for the depth can maybe also be different from one person to another. So that's why keeping an open mind to the way God works among people, and the way we find Him is very important, because I know once one has found the way to God that satisfies him, he thinks that's the way everybody should find, and that's the only way that will satisfy you. But behind all that, I have to say that if I didn't relate and say, you, the one God behind everything, you who are the source of everything, you come to my rescue and help. And I know today I'm protected, and I know doors will open sooner or later, and everybody who let me down will be the servants of my needs one day, or help me through, or maybe get out of my way so I can get through, because now I'm connected to this very deep source, and I know that every time I ask, I'm being answered, and every time I turn away or think it's by my own powers or my great CV or my understanding or people's appreciation of me, I get lost. I really get lost. So every time it's the same message, and the people turn against me in those situations, the same message. Keep to that spiritual core that have been guiding you since maybe my childhood, but especially since my youth, where I found it, and the light that grew stronger and stronger, the light of traveling into the realm of letting go, and not being dependent neither on yourself or people, but just floating in your mind and in your heart in the acceptance of God's power and presence and ability to be with you and to call out whenever you like, whenever you need. That's the greatest riches you can get on earth. That's not something that's an illusion, but you have to open your heart, or your heart has to be opened so you can receive the grace. And that's very true as well, because if you don't appreciate it, you lose it, and if you don't listen to it, maybe it will also falter or give you sickness and give you hard times. And that's what I've been living through as well. And sometimes what you need to get into that realm and flow is to get out of yourself by not letting your ego or your lust and your needs control you all the time, but fighting against them, letting go, and saying, I will keep reminding myself and making myself aware of this source of the one God that I can relate to. And again, whether it's truly the direct contact with the God or some kind of power He left in this world for us to attach to, it's from Him anyhow. It's like that spaceship in Star Wars that's floating in the universe and getting to the destination. And every voice of religious practices or meditative practices tells you, empty yourself from everything that's surrounding you to see through, to see the real reality behind it, to find the grace and the blessings. And that's what people try to do. Enjoy it, look at it, be part of it, but don't let it surround you so hard and so much that you cannot have space for that spiritual growth. If you do, you need to break out, and many people doesn't break out because they have no need for it. No crisis happens, and if it happens, they think the therapist will help them, or they go somewhere on the bench to cry with a friend, and that's very much okay. And we need people in our life to also be there for our sad moments and tiresome situations. But at the same time, that was maybe the clue for you to break free and to go and find the deeper spiritual journey of yours. Everyone has it and has the capability to go on it, but those who take the journey are fewer than those who doesn't, because maybe things gets right again, or people tell themselves, well, it was okay, I was just hurt for a moment and now it's over, it's okay. But that was maybe the clue. It was the earthquake inside you to tell you, open up for that spiritual journey so you can get to even greater depth of blessings and turn to the one and only source, the one who gave you all this and life and consciousness. You cannot see or grasp this source, but this source can see you and grasp you and interfere in your life, and it will be in contact with you whenever you are in contact, and it will sometimes take contact to you even though you don't, but you have to accept it because you have your free will and you have your free choice. But sometimes some people are just forced into it because they are loved, and that's what religious mysticism sometimes is about, that people feel chosen because they are loved, and that's why they are taken into that realm of human development without really choosing it. They are being chosen for it without choosing to go into that spiritual depth. But most of the time, people have the choice, and they get these earthquakes or critical situations where they have to deal with stuff in life. Sometimes they happen all over the world, like crises and wars and destructions and things that are shaken up, or death in the near family, marriages that gets lost, or money, or whatever people are surrounded by or attached to, a friend that turns against them, beauty that disappears, kids that's not there anymore, and all that. And all these are signs and ways to open our mind to these deeper ways that we can connect. But many of us maybe just reject it or think it's an illusion, and we sit engraved by the idea that this place is evil and is suffering, and if there was a God, we would have had it better. But maybe God's just telling you this is how it can be on the surface, but travel in another way and you will find the paradise within it all, or behind it all, or later. And even those in prison, they can be living a hell, or they can be living a kind of grace. I have known people who have went to the harshest and most tough situations, sitting in prison for years, but something in them just kept them calm and nice and good, and they found grace even in places where there weren't grace. Those stories goes back also to the martyrs of Christianity, and before that the Jewish, and before the Jewish, whoever was there, the Zoroastrian and other kind of practices in religion, where people could find grace even if people could see that they were in hell, and people who looked like living a paradisic life, they were actually in a kind of hell, even though it looked different on the surface. And I've known some of these people, and some have changed their lives and realized that, going from one place to another, or walking on a spiritual journey to connect and to relate. And it happens to people, also famous ones, like actors or writers, or just simple people who are unknown, but also the rich and people we think are living in a paradise, but having this bubbling feeling of something lacking. Suddenly they go on this journey, or some eye-opener happens to them, or a crisis in life makes them realize, and they take the journey, and many others doesn't take the journey, stay with the drinking and the drugs and the fighting, or the situation they're in, and just cursing everything and cursing life and God and people. But if you take the journey and you open your heart and you start really relating to the spiritual, they call it mysticism because you don't know what it really is and how it's happening. We don't have scientific experiments that can document it in true form. But it's just because it's another way of sensing. It's not something illusional. It's another way of sensing and relating to conscience. That's what William James talked about. That's what famous mystics have been trying to talk about. And that's why sometimes the established religions didn't like it, and the established atheists didn't like it, because it goes somewhere between. It opens the doors to many other things, and it definitely breaks with the monopoly that they like to have, and say you can only find peace if you go to this or that and do this and that. I found the peace from the ways I came from, and that's what's important. I found the way to love and graciousness, and I don't know why and how I'm speaking of this now. I didn't know I'm gonna say these things just minutes ago. I was talking about something differently altogether about politics and movements and all something else. And I got to talk about this now, and that's my my account, small account, part of it, journey with the spiritual ways. So whenever you're shaken up, listen to your inner voice calling, and you must have the bravery to open up. If you can't in your own small society, go travel and find some other place or other people. Don't be afraid of religious people and religions and monasteries or places where people worship. That could be the doors for you to enter to that spiritual realm where you grow and you get the light fulfilling your life. So that's what it is. And you have to take the step, but sometimes you have also to be invited, and something has to hit you and get inside you to bring you there. So you need the grace and love of God and of whatever source He's given first in order for you to take it. And you have to listen in order to take the steps so you can enter. So it's a movement, both sides. Sometimes it comes together, sometimes it opposes itself together. And I'm sure every person has it in him, but some people just insist on putting it into darkness and what can you say, extinguishing that light and that source, and that's a big shame. Have a good day.